So yes, I'm Christine Evans. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with the College of Letters and Science Honors Program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and my role is the Associate Director of Advising and Curriculum. Happy to be here today.
And I'm Michael Furman. I'm the Associate Director of the Florida State University Honors Program, and a lot of my job portfolio involves the design of our curriculum. So I'm happy to share what we've been working on and get ideas from everybody else.
Okay, so with a question like what is an honors curriculum, we wanted to start off by attempting to define curriculum. And as we're sure all of you have encountered, there isn't always a singular definition that seems to work well in all contexts, but some possible definitions, just to set the stage, is that a curriculum is a sequence or other intentional set of educational experiences. Or you could think about requirements, which are structured to facilitate specific learning outcomes or otherwise align with program values and goals. And we know in the space today, there are people representing honors programs across different scopes. So that could be university level honors, kind of university-wide honors programs. You can have curricula that are specific to a school or college within a university context. There's departmental honors, sometimes called honors in the major, honors in the liberal arts, which is a model that my program uses in addition to having honors in the major, or sometimes there are sophomore honors. So it can be connected to kind of stages of an undergraduate's educational progress or the institutional layers, kind of defining the scope of a curriculum.
Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the guidance from the National Collegiate Honors Council. So there are a couple documents that can help you in formulating your idea of an honors curriculum. One is from the definition of honors education, and both of these things come with a caveat that I will talk about in a second here. But from the definition, the Honors College program provides opportunities for measurably broader, deeper, and more complex learning-centered and learner-directed experiences for its students than are available elsewhere in the institution. These opportunities are appropriately tailored to fit the institution's culture and mission and frequently occur within a close community of students and faculty. And then from the shared principles document, which is more recent, given the wide variety of ways students now satisfy university or college curricular requirements, honors programs and colleges benefit from as much curricular flexibility as possible. For programs containing a robust honors curriculum and/or honors college that awards degrees, a target of 20 to 25% of a student's credit hours in honors is typical, while few fall below 15%. So you can see even in these two definitions, from two documents that are about 10 years apart, that there's an increased recognition that flexibility is kind of now king when it comes to designing an honors curriculum. That's particularly true in circumstances where your honors program serves the entire university. That's what we have at FSU, so we have to serve every major, including pre-professional degrees. So everything we do has to be structured in a way that allows students to complete their requirements in a reasonable and manageable way while also fulfilling their major requirements. And the caveat with both of these things is that I'm actually on the NCHC Teaching and Learning Committee, and one of our current tasks is to revise all of these things for new definitions of what honors is and what a curriculum should look like. And the initial conversations that we've had around that all revolve around this idea, one, of flexibility in the curriculum, but also further delineating what makes honors special, and what makes honors unique. Because as pedagogical progress continues over the decades, like the things that were novel and new in 2016 that we could say, this is what makes honors, now are much more typical in a lot of the classes that we encounter throughout the university. So we're wrestling with that as a committee, and I will be sure to update everybody as we go through that process. But within this idea of flexibility in the curriculum, you have to have flexibility in components. And so that leads to a pretty wide array of potential components that you can have within your curriculum. So I'll go through some of these because the honors program at FSU actually uses quite a few of them. So starting with honors exclusive courses. And these can be either generated by a faculty that are unique to the program. So here at FSU, we employ 10 faculty directly in the honors program that only teach and design honors courses for us. So we focus on interdisciplinarity. There are courses that you can only get by being an honors student. You can also have these designed by faculty from departments if you work in a collaborative model without your own faculty at your institution. Can also talk about reserving sections of courses for honors, and then that gets you into the conversation of what is honors and how do you take a class and make it honors. You can also do honors augments. This is something we're doing much more of now with upper division courses and allowing students to work toward their major while fulfilling honors. The model that we use for this is a section within a section. So you take a course, you build an honors section that's paired with it, and then the students in the honors section use differentiated assignments, value-added projects, things that are public facing, because that's one of our values in our program. The dissemination and communication of knowledge, things that feed back into the university community, those types of projects then make that honors section honors and allows them to count for requirements. Accelerated courses, that's a decision that kind of you and whatever the degree granting body that you work with, whether that's your college or a different program, a different department is. Approved experiential learning. This is something that we're working on now as well. We've started doing our own study abroad programs. There are many honors colleges and programs, I'm sure some of them are represented here, that place a huge emphasis on both study abroad and service learning and make that integral to their identity. And it's about whatever works for you. So if that's something that you can do that deepens and enriches experiences, then you should absolutely add it into your repertoire of things that allow students to complete honors. You did notice that in those definitions that I just read, that community is quite a big emphasis, and that's something that I think if we were going to pull out one thing that could be universal to honors, it is the development of this intellectual community. I think that's something that we pretty much all strive for in all of our programs. So we have a first year colloquium that's peer-led in FSU honors that builds that community among a much larger student body. And then we also have an upper level colloquium that we're going to be piloting in the next couple of years that serves as a transition point from college to adult life, or I guess adult life, right, in quotation marks, or whatever comes next in a student's life. And then research and capstone projects, those can either be directed by the honors program or college or by individual departments. We're working with departments right now that have their own capstones already to figure out ways to integrate those into honors experiences. And then individual course contracts are something that I think pretty much everybody is familiar with. I'm happy to say at FSU we're starting to phase these out because the administrative burden on them was really high for how big our program was. So by kind of getting this flexibility in all these other ways for students to complete their requirements, we're able to take out some of these components that are really, really heavy administrative components and don't really have the consistency that we would like to see across experiences for students. So it's a necessary evil in many cases, I think. But if I think we're a good example of, if you think about it and work hard at it, you can find ways to phase them out. And you can also find ways to make them less of an administrative burden, which I know Christine's structure in her program does quite well with contracts.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So just to echo, I also am part of a program where we use everything on this list in one way or another in terms of how students can earn honors credit, with the kind of caveat that we don't have a standard first year colloquium, but we are developing some colloquia options for students pursuing their senior honors theses. So that's where some real energy has been lately. And we do have resources if that could be of interest to anyone later in terms of how we set up the expectations for students and instructors pursuing those individual course contracts, and kind of revising how we communicate expectations around that has been helpful in reducing the burden of reviewing and approving those projects. At the same time, I will say that when we have courses with multiple students trying to initiate contracts, I take that as a conversation to the instructor and the department to hopefully change the course to allow for honors enrollment without that extra administrative layer in future semesters. So there's an ongoing conversation to be had with departments if you see kind of the student need being placed in certain areas to try and smooth the way to earn honors credit for everyone. Once we have thought about all the different ways students can earn honors credits at your institution, it is also helpful to think about how those components come together. What are the organizing structures of a curriculum? And so again, just to highlight different types of options that are available, some programs will use numerical totals. That could be simply counting the credits assigned to the different courses that students have taken. That could be models of different points being assigned to different types of experiences and students needing to accumulate a certain number of points. In many cases, using subcategories can help to show emphasis in different areas of the curriculum or to demonstrate the priorities that a program has in terms of students reflecting those different kinds of experiences or having the different honors values represented in the curriculum through the use of subcategories. So that could show up in the form of breadth. As an honors in the liberal arts program, we require students have 6 of their honors credits come from each of the areas, humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences, for example. And we also have sub-requirements that ensure that students have enough of those community-based honors experiences like reserved sections, but can also earn a smaller set of their requirements through the more individual honors learning. Other organizing structures could be sequences, as Michael was referring to, a common experience in the first year. There may be junior year or other midpoint sequences that students move to and capstone requirements. And then I imagine GPAs and grade components of the organizing structure are quite common still as well. So the pie charts here at the bottom are just a quick visual representation of how it is important to think about the different pieces coming together. And we know that there are many ways to do that. Also recognizing that the more complicated that a curriculum gets, the more challenges students may face in putting all of those pieces together or understanding kind of the steps they will need to take in order to move through that curriculum. And so there's certainly a different balance that needs to be struck at each institution in terms of being intentional and specific in the requirements, while also allowing that flexibility and kind of ease of communicating what the requirements are. So to kind of give everyone a chance to hear some additional examples and think about how these components come together in your own program, we're going to go to breakout rooms in a moment here. And my task for you all is to try to explain as quickly as you can, what are your curriculum, your curricular requirements, your program requirements. And that may be easy, or it may be, I anticipate, challenging in some cases, but think about how quickly can you explain that to someone else. And then as you have time in your breakout rooms, you could dig in a little bit more to how exactly students earn honors credits or progress in the requirements, where the common experiences in the curriculum versus where students have individual choice. What is the organizing principle around the requirements, and how are those requirements tracked? Is it built in some way, or is that a manual process run by staff? Kind of however that might look for your unit. So again, we'll take about 10 minutes for this. Hopefully the breakout rooms work out to have around 3 people in each room, so you'll each have a chance to introduce yourselves and work through these prompts. So we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
We just got teleported over, so I imagine
Fabulous. I hope that wasn't too disruptive. But thank you. I hope that was a nice chance to check in with others about your honors curricula. And we're going to take, I did also want to acknowledge that I saw in the chat some calls to share more about making those honors contract type experiences more administratively efficient. And so we can circle back to that at the end of the session, and I will try and share some resources or kind of share a bit about the process that we've undertaken, and maybe others have great tips to add too. But right now, Michael and I are curious if a few people would be willing to share out First, if there were any categories of how students can progress in an honors curriculum or structures of how you're organizing your honors curriculum that we missed. So if anyone has kind of additions to add in either of those areas, we'd love to hear them. And then also, if a few people wouldn't mind reflecting out for the group, what about your curriculum made it easy or difficult to explain? So if you would feel comfortable sharing out to either of those questions, you can raise your hand, or we'll also keep an eye on the chat if anyone wants to volunteer that way. I see Catherine's hand. So Catherine, hello.
So I just had a great conversation with Buffy from North Carolina, and I am from the University of New Hampshire, where we have the Hamel Honors and Scholars College, which became a college from a program year and a half ago, and which has a brand new curriculum. So one feature of our curriculum that I haven't heard, maybe two features, is one of our 4 categories of honors work is called gateways, and it is what it sounds like. It's sort of introductory activities that students engage in the freshman year to get to know each other, in the honors college across outside of classes. They're very informal. They're not meant to be academically rigorous. They're meant to be community building. So we've had, business professors leading 3 sessions on mindfulness meditation. We've had botanists leading people on walks in college woods and talking about what's there, and book groups, and really all kinds of things. We've also started having our senior leadership students start to offer some. So that's something that everyone has to do 4 of in their freshman year, just sort of become part of the community and get to know each other. We have courses, we have co-curricular experiences. Students can do a combination of both of those things to earn most of their units. You don't really have to do more. You can choose how much of each you do. You have to do a minimum of 8 credits/units worth of courses. And you have to do a minimum of 2 units worth of co-curricular experiences, but you could do as many as you want. And so students have that flexibility because it's different if you're a mechanical engineer than if you're a theater student and all of that. And then finally, one of our culminating experiences, in addition to the thesis or the project, is a new thing that we invented called the synthesis, which is the honors synthesis. And that is a kind of peer-oriented workshop process that happens over the course of the senior year, just starting at the end of the junior year, where they're basically reflecting on their entire college career, what their education has been, and figuring out what they have to articulate about who they are now and what they can do now, the impact they can have now that they couldn't before when they began, and then figuring out across a series of workshops led by faculty fellows in the Honors College, what the deliverable might look like to express that. And so, as I said to Buffy, that could be an interpretive dance, it could be a standard presentation, it could be something in between. So that's also a different thing. So very complicated and difficult to track, and we're working on that problem.
Okay,
But
thank you.
flexible.
Yeah. No, so we have kind of both the gateway components at the beginning and some additional ways that cumulative senior final year experience could look in your program. I'm also seeing Ola shared from Ohio State University, their curricular components, and a newish one being an e-portfolio, which seems to overlap with that idea of a cumulative and summative synthesis of the experience toward the end. Fantastic. Would anyone want to briefly share kind of what about your curriculum felt easy or difficult to explain?
I'll share, Christine.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so what I was able to share is that we've just recently moved to a minor from a transcript distinction. The minor is 18 hours versus the 30 points that we had previously, and so it's a smaller number, but it's also more streamlined in terms of expectations, and we're teaching out the other, so there's more complication there, but the hope is that eventually it's easier for students to understand and process. although it is closer to that 15% of the student's degree that showed up earlier. So
No, thank you for sharing. And you mentioned this in this new phase, it would be transcripted the way that a minor would be transcripted for students.
correct, yeah.
Yeah, I know working with registrars' offices and understanding where the honors does or doesn't get listed is challenging in a lot of cases, but also very important to students in terms of how you communicate what it is they are earning. Um, Very nice. Well, thank you all. I know that there's not enough time for everyone to share out, but those were some helpful additions. I definitely am glad that you were able to discuss that and more. And it's started to come up already, but as we're thinking about what we count toward our curriculum, how do we organize our curriculum, how do we explain it? Michael and I both reflected a lot on the critical nature of knowing your curriculum's why. Like, why are these the requirements? Why is this the curriculum? And to the extent that anyone is able to be working on curricular changes right now or reflecting on how you communicate your curriculum to various audiences, that happens in tandem with reflecting on your program's core identity and your mission, particularly within the context of your larger institution. So what are the values and identity of your honors program, in particular as something unique on your campus? And, thinking about how is it that the requirements can reflect that. In my context, the honors and the liberal arts requirements are reflecting the values of an enhanced liberal arts experience. So that's why we have the different breadth requirements, which sync up with the larger college's breadth requirements across the degree. For students pursuing honors in the major, kind of the value and the identity of that direction is more focused on the capstone experience of research project. And so building up student capacities to take on that senior thesis is really critical to how honors in the major curricula are built, but not a key component or even a required component of the honors in the liberal arts. And so thinking about how those structures and those requirements reflect the different values and identities. But importantly too is how transparent is that connection to students. And so if you can point to like, this is a requirement and that connects to what students understand the purpose of that honors program to be, you get buy-in that way. It's also more transparent to students whether or not they may wish to join that program and complete it and how they could talk about it in their future endeavors. And I'm going to hand things off to Michael.
Yeah, and the framework that you're building around your values, it's important to recognize and remember that that also needs to operate within a framework of your institution and within your state if you're at a public institution, right? So there are strengths and constraints to every type of framework that you might have institutionally or legislatively. So, like, let's say you're in a state where what professors should and should not be teaching or doing in the classroom is defined differently every single year. Your program needs to be flexible enough to adapt to those things. But to do that, you often rely on the strengths of your program. So for us at Florida State, being a program and not a college allows us quite a bit of flexibility in the way that we work across the university and across departments, being able to find stakeholders pretty much everywhere. And we also benefit at FSU from a very long tradition of honors here. So faculty are generally eager to participate in honors, and it's just up to you to find pathways to allow them to do that supports your values and is best for your students, because in the end, the student experience is what we're all aiming for anyway. That's our priority. Anyway, and then thinking about the types of constraints that you can have, you really just have to design a curriculum and courses and opportunities that are not quite universal, and not quite eternal, I guess, but are fairly long-lived, right? So, we believe that regardless of the requirements that are attached to our courses, whether they count for statewide gen eds or not, we think they still have value, and we're able to explain those values to our students in pretty pragmatic terms. That's why we have a sense of development of knowledge and then the sharing of that knowledge in public accessible ways, so that the honors program at FSU tries to become kind of the center of learning and pedagogy, regardless of what's going on at wider levels. And I think that that turns out pretty effectively. And then, most of us aren't the founders of the programs and colleges that we work in, so we're inevitably going to inherit some systems. And so the another thing you have to be thinking about when you're designing curricula is if you want to make changes, and I think everybody that comes into an honors curriculum wants to make changes in some way when they arrive, you have to do it in a way that preserves the experience of students that are already there, but also sets your new students up for success. So thinking about ways to transition out of things that you're doing that don't tank your completion rates or suddenly cut students off from completing honors. So there are wider frameworks to think about as we're going through this, and all of that arrives at the ultimate question of what honors is, right? Of what honors means to your institution. And so thinking about for your program, like what makes a course or experience honorsy. I've talked a little bit already about what that is for us. We want our students to demonstrate their intellectual leadership and do that through communication, because we think that's something that is important and eternal in the way that humans interact with one another. So that's kind of how we do it, but everyone can do something different. And when Christine and I were designing this presentation, Christine actually came up with this next phrase on there of honors is not the default. And I think that's a great way to think about it of, whatever you want honors to be at your institution, honors is something different than what is being offered, or honors is something unique compared to what else is being offered. And then thinking about how that extends to the curricular level, doing that through specific courses, specific requirements, mechanisms of support for those, both for faculty and for students. So that last point there of how do the expectations of what is honors get communicated to instructors, that's something that we're working on quite a bit right now of finding kind of like one-page quick hits of, what are these different course options that you can do. We actually built a flow chart of, here's what you want to do with your honors course. This is the type of course that you can design and how it can interact with our curriculum that faculty seem to appreciate. So thinking about that communication aspect is really vital as well, because you're likely to have faculty at your institution that, they're not totally keyed into what honors has changed and evolved into in the last 20 years. So it's your job to communicate that to them and make sure that they buy into it in the same way that they did before. And thinking about like common learning outcomes, what's the one thing that you want students to be able to do when they leave your program? And generally, when you're trying to articulate those things, you want to do so in a fairly basic way, thinking of, mottos or meanings or objectives for your program and integrating all of that into program values and your mission. And whether that mission is generated by you or the administration at your university, all of that needs some kind of synthesis to come together. So, that's kind of what we had for you. We tried not to be prescriptive in what we talked about because we recognize that honors curricula are different everywhere. And I think the breakout sessions that we had demonstrate that to everyone. So, we've got a little bit of time left. So we want to thank you for joining us today and talking through curricula with us and kind of the things that might be on the horizon for honors curricula and ways that we can engage our students and help them move toward fulfilling our values as programs and colleges. So thank you, and we can move on to some questions. Either raise your hand or in the chat, or are there things that you want to talk about that you want to get either group problem solving or group catharsis in? Go right ahead.
I think as questions come in too, I'll just try and quickly touch back on the honors contract question that came up earlier. So one thing I can share in the chat, and this is just the current example from the College of Letters and Science honors program that I work for. We actually have a term green sheet that we use because the proposal form that students used to use for these honors contracts was on green paper. And even though it's all electronic now, we have preserved the name. So what I'm going to be sharing is our green sheet information page. But if you want to just think of that as honors contracts, that should work well. And we've revised kind of our information, both student facing and instructor facing over the last couple of years to try and tackle a lot of the common questions we were getting, because a huge part of the administrative burden was the back and forth with students where they were trying to understand like what is expected of me, or if you can't approve this project as is, like what needs to change. And so we really tried to identify what are the key components that we as a program are looking for if we are going to approve um, the project. It also requires instructor buy-in, but we have found that getting instructor buy-in is a lot easier if we can tell them that in the cases of these honors contracts, it's student initiated and the workload really is about the student, not expecting the instructor to design something extra for the student to do. And that the instructor role can be more in guidance of like, yes, this is relevant to this project, and we will check in on process along the way, but I don't need to be designing a whole second syllabus for this student. So by presenting our expectations as a program for these contracts and giving some examples of like about how much work, quote unquote, the student should do, that has really streamlined our review process and given students more productive examples to build on as they're coming up with their own creative ways to supplement the work in a particular course. Other behind the scenes things that have helped on the administrative end is that we moved our proposal form to a Qualtrics, and we're able to link that directly to a spreadsheet so that as the proposals are coming in, a lot of that spreadsheet is pre-populated and we can check off in different columns the different things we need to ensure are in place before we would give approval. So if I won't take up more time on that here, but if there is anyone wanting to think about the administrative back end of something like honors contracts, like feel free to reach out to me after today and I could share more about what our program has tried to do to help with that.
There's a question in the chat about how our program's tracking experiential learning opportunities. I would love to hear more about that too, because that's the thing that we are looking at now and thinking about, if we want to be able to track people more effectively, looking at their transcript, how does experiential learning fit into this?
So I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand. I don't know where that button is, and I feel like a Zoom loser. But anyhow, that was a conversation that we had in our chat, was about tracking experiential learning. And actually it was Leisha, she was in our chat too. But we we're starting to use Suitable on our campus. So we're hoping that that will help us to track experiential learning. But when I was at USF, where we started was actually just through a Canvas course, like a very basic, simple, students submitted their experiential learning activities in a Canvas course and we counted them and at least gave us a place to count them. That is really hard to scale, but we had a lot of students and we did that for a while until we had an internal app that was built, which is amazing. I was going to talk about the augmentation piece, though, in a way to try to help improve the quality of that, because that's a discussion we've been having a lot of. Our students are there's so many hours required of them, and they are having to augment so many courses that it just becomes very box checking. And the expectations of the students and the faculty both are kind of in a feedback loop of just extra work, another paper, another presentation, another project. And that really doesn't capture what we want them to be doing, more of an outward faced applied learning, get out in the community, take this subject that you're learning in the class and pull in another subject, something that would be a higher quality. So one of the ways that we talked about improving that was through our introductory seminar and trying to spend time with students, giving them expectations and ideas about what they will do when they are going to augment a course, because that'll help the faculty improve the quality if the student already has a better expectation. We're also working on the faculty end to try to offer them some seminars to talk about what are some great ideas for ways that students can augment the course that won't just add another paper for you to grade at the end of the semester, but might be something exciting that could move you forward either in the research you're doing or in some other project in another class. So both ends, working with faculty, but also helping students to understand what quality, good, exciting projects would look like. Because I think students are a lot more excited about something that they can do out in the community or that seems like they could carry it forward beyond the classroom than they are to just write another paper. No, I don't know students who are like, please let me write one more paper at the end of the semester. And so if we could just give them maybe permission and then some ideas and sort of push them a little bit, I feel like that would go a long way. This is easy for me to talk about because it's all still theoretical and I'm not getting any pushback because we hadn't started it yet. But that is the thing that we've been talking about doing at WKU.
Awesome. I do sometimes encounter the student who just wants to write another paper, and it's nice when I can, through our green sheet process, encourage them to at least consider other other options, and do something that they wouldn't otherwise be assessed on in the course. But no, thank you for sharing that experience. I'm also seeing a lot of buzz in the chat around Canvas courses and tracking experiential components. Michael, I don't know if you had any experience or wanted to jump in on that topic.
Yeah, I just put in there that we use Canvas pages for each of our cohorts, and this is like a relatively new thing. So each of our cohorts has a Canvas page that lists their requirements and also has access to like forms not only for things like contracts as we're phasing them out, but also like scholarship opportunities, things like that, because we have like study abroad scholarships that are unique to honors. So all the links and stuff are in there. Jody had her hand raised, I think, wanted to comment on this too.
Sure. Thanks. I was just going to say, we track all of our requirements through our degree audit. And historically, we have allowed tutorials or augmented classes, contracts, but we're actually this year moving away from that. We're no longer going to allow that for all of the reasons you've all talked about. And we are moving to allow students to count up to 6 units of experiential learning in place of what was becoming virtually all tutorials. The way we're tracking that is through a Microsoft form that their honors advisor receives an application for the experience they want to count. Then that advisor works with them to make sure that this works, and then they go do the thing they said they were going to do, and then they do a reflection and verify that they achieve the learning outcomes, and we do that as well. And then if we're going to give them full credit, we go into the degree audit and waive up to those 6 units. So that's how we're doing it. We also decided that we did not want to get 6 1 credit hour applications. So what we have told them is that if you're going to count experiential learning, you need to submit that as one packet so that you can show the synthesis between these disparate things. So if you were the student government president and you had a short-term education abroad and you want those to count for 6 combined credits, you're going to submit a package so that we're not getting a couple of small applications throughout their college career, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, thank you. I know in our program, we also track things directly through the audit. So if there's going to be an exception for study abroad for a semester or something like that, we're getting that Qualtrics form, and that feeds into a spreadsheet that our advisors work with to ensure whether we need to get more information or approve or deny. But then if it's approved, it's going to show up right in the DARS via either an exception, or our institution has different flavors of honors designations available. One of them is the honors optional, where some students in the class are earning honors credit and others aren't. And so we can work with our dean's office to trigger on the honors option in the case of the contracted courses. See, I'm thinking we maybe have time for one more kind of short question or topic before we'll want to wrap up today. Michael, are you seeing anything that you'd want to kind of raise up, or does anyone else have a question? Catherine, maybe? Yeah.
I'm curious. I think there are several of our programs / colleges that do require some amount of experiential learning / service learning as part of their curriculum, and then have to learn how to track it. And I'm wondering, like, I'm curious, like, how many people in the room use Suitable and or another vendor? And how many people have created their own apps, which we have done, and we're still wondering whether we should look at Suitable. I mean, we're looking at Suitable, but we're not decided yet because of the money. And also, we don't want to make any too rapid changes after just launching our new toolbox of apps. But I don't know if there's a way on this Zoom thing to like raise your hand if you use Suitable, but I'm curious. I know several people at the conference that I met did use Suitable in CHC.
Yeah, I'm remembering maybe an old version of a video program where I could just create a quick poll, but I'm not seeing that option right now.
That's okay.
From the chat, I'm seeing a few folks mention love of Suitable if they are using it, but just as many, if not more, who are using Canvas or something similar.
Right.
Happy to have folks jump in and say more about that if you're using Suitable, for example.
Oh, I have a question also on the grad degree, using a graduate course. This came up, this is, seems like a no-brainer. You're taking a graduate course, yay, that gets honors units. But my curriculum committee recently said, well, they can get credit if they're taking a graduate course as an honors student as part of their undergraduate experience, but not if they're enrolled in a graduate program, because there's the accelerated masters and things like that.
Sure.
And I was frankly thinking about administrative, like, let's just not distinguish, please. But they're like, no, because technically they are a master's student if they are taking a master's class as an accelerated master's student. I'm like, well, so I'm curious. Well, yeah, Peter's kind of. Yeah.
I agree with
We
you.
don't.
We allow
We count both.
we allow students to take courses for graduate credit if they were in an accelerated master's program and had not yet completed their undergraduate. Then
Right.
that graduate course actually counts toward their undergraduate.
It
So
does. It does.
it's
Here too.
kind of a no-brainer to count it also for honors.
I think so too. I'm gonna
Ours
revisit.
might not even count toward undergrad, but we don't care. Like, I mean, we're envisioning it as they're because we have PeopleSoft student admin, right? Like, and it's students are only allowed to be in one degree plan at a time. So they are either an undergraduate or a grad student, even if they're in an accelerated program. And so if they're an undergraduate in a graduate course, for us, that counts as the level of academic rigor we're looking for in an honors course. So as long as they don't include that in their undergrad degree plan, then they can still list it on our honors degree plan for us to count to honorize their undergrad degree, to put the honors designation on their degree, but they can push the credits wherever they want. They can push it forward to the accelerated masters or forward to just a master's or, whatever.
So they can't use it as fulfillment of a degree requirement for undergrad?
It just doesn't matter to us. Like, they could, but they also don't have to. Like,
I thought you were saying
I
thought you said as long as they don't count it towards their
Well,
degree.
if they don't count it, they can save it for the graduate degree. If they put it in their undergrad plan of study, it can still count as honors, of course, because that's where the honors is coming. But then they couldn't use those graduate credits for something further, right? Some of it is, we have students who take a ton of graduate courses, and so maybe they don't need it for a future degree, but most students don't do that. Most students hold the courses, and then when they graduate with their undergraduate degree, the registrar flips them into a grad degree plan, and whatever courses are still remaining then become what satisfies the graduate degree.
So I don't want to cut this off. We can hang out after, but we are running up against the hour and starting to lose people. So I wanted to thank Christine, my colleague from across the state, and Michael from Florida State University as well for a wonderful presentation, very thought-provoking. I took a lot of notes and will share with my faculty because we're in the throes of curricular redefinition. Um, uh, this was the last all-access meeting of this academic year for CoHE, but deans and directors, you should look at your emails for details about upcoming deans and directors meetings in March and April. And then again, we have Heru in May if people are able to go. That's I'm new to CoHE, I guess, so that's where people hang out. There was a question earlier about students. Heru is not really a student conference. It's faculty, staff, more on that bent. But that's where CoHE has its annual business meeting. I plan to be out of the country for that meeting, so I won't be at Heru. Sorry, not sorry. Anyway, that concludes our formal meeting. If people want to stay online, the recording will stop, especially if you have some things that you want to talk about that you didn't want on the recording. But otherwise, we will trickle away to our various dinner and dog walking and whatnot appointments.